You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who have been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and then definitely follow them on Instagram for all the information that you need, because I'm sure that's where you follow us as well, at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode up in Edmond today with Jason Duncan, who has been on a previous podcast, talk about cycling, Cycle 66. If you haven't listened to that one, it's a few podcasts back and definitely worth going and checking out. Awesome event coming to Edmond. But for people who didn't listen to that podcast, Jason, thanks for having me up at the house, but give people a little bit of context. I mean, where you grew up, who you are, what you do, if they didn't listen to that Cycle 66 podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, thanks again for having me. So I'm an Edmond kid. Grew up in Edmond, went to graduated from Memorial High School, ended up going to college at Belmont University in Nashville, and then found myself in Bozeman, Montana for a bit after that, before I came back here at the end of 2008. And really never felt like I was going to be back in this community. And it's funny how, and I'm sure this will come up lots of times when we're talking, but just the fact that, you know, when opportunity happens, you take it, and you start to look how you're going to build that stuff. But ultimately, I'm an Edmond born kid, and grew up here, and it's been a great place to be.
So growing up here, was it like, I just can't wait to get out of here, I've got to go do my own thing? I mean,
I've always had an itch, I think. Yeah. And there's been, I think for me, I went to Oakdale schools, so I was kind of on the south, technically, I guess, Oklahoma City. So I kind of grew up in that kind of light that Oakdale was my place. And for the people that don't know what Oakdale is, now it's getting bigger, and there's a high school, I think, happening at some point. But at that point, there was 20 to 25 of us from kindergarten to 8th grade. So it kind of felt like this tiny little community anyway. So Memorial is my first Edmond schools, Edmond kind of thing. Of course, I played soccer all through school too, so I had a lot of friends in and out of that. But I don't know that I didn't ever dislike what I was doing here. And I think that's the difference. I always had an itch for what else is possible. I didn't have this. I think I was one of the few people in my network, at least, that didn't go to a state school. But I always felt like there was something more that I could take away. I've always been a little independent. And so having the ability to say I can go anywhere. I always thought I'd go for soccer, and I thought that would kind of drive my decisions. But when that didn't happen, it's like, hey, I can go anywhere I want. The whole country is available, and what better time than college? You know, it's somewhat protected, and so because of that, I ended up choosing Nashville for music business, and then, you know, again, I've always had that itch of like, what can I do? I've never been attached to one place. I can appreciate the places I'm in. I don't ever, you know. It's never moving and changing environment is never because I'm unhappy. It's always because, hey, you know what? Like, this has been awesome, but what's next? And I've always had that look. And so that's kind of, so I'd say when it comes to Edmond, it always felt like a small town. I'd never, for a phase of my life, that suburb life wasn't necessarily what I was expecting. And even from 2008, I lived in Oklahoma City. Our offices were in the Plaza District. North of 23rd Street in my life was only for work. I didn't do that very often. And so even moving to Edmond in 2012, I guess it was, I always felt like I had to, you know, chew my words, and, you know, so it had this weird, like, weirdness to it. Never would I have written a chapter, you know, pre-written this chapter of I'm going to be in Edmond, I'm going to own a company, I'm going to participate in city activity, I'm going to be a proponent and advocate for how strong Edmond can be and will be.
And be so involved.
So I think there is that kind of deal, but at the same time, I was happy to take on what that felt like the next project.
It's funny how life works like that, isn't it? It just keeps throwing you ideas or throwing you opportunities, and you take one, and then it just opens up this entire spider web of opportunities. And
I talk about it a lot.
Get into it. You really get into it.
And I talk about with students and on boards when I get to speak with people about business and entrepreneurship, is that saying yes is a big deal. And it gets, I think, a little bit jumbled because saying yes too many times, too many things can bury you. Excuse me. But saying yes to opportunity and the ability to say, hey, what can that idea do for me? It's saying yes to opportunities. And I think we did that, and it was super strange. And I won't forget the car ride from a meeting with a landlord in Oklahoma City to a meeting with our future landlord in downtown Edmond. I won't forget it because the whole time I was mad. I didn't want to do it. It was part of our plan to do it, and I just didn't feel right. I was like, I'm not living in Edmond.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I grew up here. It was just because wasn't allowing myself to see what Edmond could be, and at that point, it wasn't much. For what I needed.
Yeah.
And so it was that attempt to, once we finally got there and had these meetings, and it's like, hey, we could make this. We could help be the change that this district needs.
Right.
And if we can help with that, let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool because you really have been a huge part of it and done some awesome things, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But when, you're growing up here, you're going to Oakdale and you go to high school at Edmond and then people are probably students and friends are going to OSU, they're going to OU. You're into soccer and obviously you're into music because you choose music business to go to Nashville. I mean, Nashville is Music City, isn't it? It's
absolutely.
So you're 18 years old thinking, I am going to Nashville. That must have been a great feeling.
It was. And even now, I loved every second that I lived there. And, we left right after I graduated. I mean, literally graduation, and the truck was packed and we drove out. And so, but it wasn't because I didn't love it. We loved Nashville. We loved, the outdoors. We loved the music. We loved the community that was there. And there was a lot happening. I mean, it was a great place. The weather was brutal. I'm not much for big humidity. Of course, I live in Oklahoma, so I have to get used to it. But
nothing like it is down there.
Yeah, but it felt different.
Yeah.
But there was so much excitement there. It's like, what is this going to look like? Like, what are my chances? Belmont sits at the end of Music Row, and it's like, what does that mean? And what is this? What's the history of this? And the opportunities are endless. All you have to do is work for it. Be a good person. Ask a lot of questions, say yes to opportunities, and what could happen. Yeah. And so I think I left there in a different spot than when I went, which is what should happen. Sure. At that age and through those experiences. And, I went in thinking, hey, maybe I'll get to work in publishing or, copyright law or something like that. Or, even like managing bands and groups and venues I'm opening a coffee company. And that's a strange thing to say that I gained from Belmont University living in the Music City. But all those things help. They're all foundational pieces. And I was excited for what we did. And I learned a lot about my other passions of, being on the bicycle and being outside and what that community feels like. I learned as well there. And I took all those things and I think I'm still using them. So I was stoked. It was an exciting time to be in Nashville. And now it's, tenfold different than when I was there. And I'm still excited to hear friends doing great things.
So obviously you were into music growing up a lot. What kind of music, what instruments did you play?
So my main focus as a kid was piano. So all through high school, that was kind of my instrument. And then a little bit of keys, MIDI work toward the end. I did a lot at that point in my life in church music and things like that was kind of what I found myself doing.
Very structured,
but just it was kind of the beginning of this like non-denominational kind of music thing that was happening. So I would still probably put it in that like kind of singer-songwriter thing, I guess. Did a little bit of my own, had a band in I think my junior, senior year that was a little heavier. That was fun. It was a great season. And then into college, I picked up guitar. I also played a little bit of bass too. So I picked up guitar in college. When you go to Belmont, everyone's better at you at everything.
It's like the movie Fame, isn't it?
Yeah,
like everybody's good at
you
everything.
show up and have all your gear and you're taking up to your class, and then your roommate also has all that gear and he's taking up to the room, and your hallway people have all their gear, and and everybody is phenomenal. And again, none of these guys were going for music education, they were going for business, but everyone was just really good at what they
talented,
did. And so because of that, there's music everywhere and there's instruments everywhere. And so I picked up guitar, kind of self-taught that, played keys for, several singer-songwriter. At that point, Brit Rock, this Travis Coldplay kind of thing was hugely popular. So I played for a couple of guys that had a very synthy Brit Rock sound and did that for a while. Played locally with a group, another writer that just needed a backup band. Still did the church thing for that those 4 years too, and it was good. I had a fun time. I learned quickly that I really liked the back line of what music was. All through high school, I was the front guy, and in church on Sundays, I still was that. But being able to go and show up and say, "Hey, this is the weekly schedule. These are the places we're playing." And I got to show up with my keyboards and create my little cocoon back there, and and play was really great. And it started, I think, opening my eyes to what the fact that like support is a big deal. My buddy Evan couldn't do the things he was doing without all of us backing him up.
Right.
And so I started to understand that music business is a pretty like self-fulfilling thing.
Sure.
And what can my role be in that? Because it was becoming apparent that it wasn't to be the man,
to be the front man, and have all the eyes.
I didn't like it anymore. I liked the business of it because the front man in most cases was the one that was running things.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily like to be or need to be this guy that everyone was seeing. I was happy to be behind the lights. And I think the guys I played with the same way, and seeing some of those guys on the Grammy shows and making huge hits with huge bands is incredible. And I can remember lots of shows and lots of practices in the apartment, like in the apartment next to having conversations with the electric guitar player about who's doing what pad. And, because we were, at some point, like electronic is electronic. And if we're both doing that, but having these conversations about how do we play with each other, not over each other, and who's going to do what. And, and then I see him playing with groups like Little Big Town, and it's like, he's doing the same thing. He's crushing it. Yeah. And it's awesome to see, and it's exciting. And I can hold on to this time that we had conversations about the importance of playing together and collaboration. Right. And this theme that I have right now is this collaboration over compromise and how we work together. And I mean, honestly, I can tailor this back to being in bands, and it wasn't about the head person or the writer or the director of the music. It was about how do we as a band come together to help make this guy great. Yeah. That's our job. Yeah. And the reality of it is that most of us would have gotten replaced had he gotten to the next level, which is fine for me. Yeah. And then some of those guys went on to big things, and that's great too. Yeah. And I was super excited for them, and that's that was that world for me.
That's such a melting pot of talent, but also like, it all comes back to, like you said, collaboration, community. You're all coming together to make this sound and put on a show and make sure that the front man has the backing that he needs.
Yeah, lift him up.
And that's exactly the same as what you do in business.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right?
And in fact, I had this I woke up last night. There's a venue called Exit In Nashville, which a lot of people have probably heard of. Awesome place. And it's one of those places on the wall. It's like all the bands that have ever played there. So it's on the left side, if you're on stage, so stage left, it is this huge wall, and it's all of the huge people. Yeah. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, it's funny that like a group of us are playing this thing here. And so we show up and we get everything in, and the head guy comes in and he's like, man, my voice is about to go. And we're like, wait, this is the worst time for that to happen. And so all of us are mic'd, and of course we know every word, and it's like, hey, I might need someone to like
pick up.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but it's not like, this is your stuff. So having someone else sing your songs when you're standing at the front is kind of strange. But really, like, the answer is sure. Like, mix our mics in the mix like you would if we were out front this time, and that's fine. And we'll carry you if you need it. And luckily, it didn't ever have to happen. But I just remember that conversation of like, wait, your voice is going away and you want one of us to like take over for you in the middle of a song. That's strange.
The trust is there.
Yeah, but it needed to happen. And I think it was just one of those it was a weird thing I woke up with, and I don't know why I was thinking about that, but I think there's just something to how music works together, and and there's business everywhere. If you let it.
That must have been such a great experience being down there, and being in the years that you're really growing as a person, learning all these skills, and because like you said, all these skills transfer to now, right? Everything you do now is what you've learned in the past, and you can draw from that. Like, oh, we did this and this, and when you start thinking about it and talking about it, it makes so much sense, doesn't it?
And what it boils down to always is that people matter. Yeah. Across the board. And I think, through my first company that we ran and operated and sold, and even through our real estate company now, like, I have a hard time attaching to this like idea of projecting numbers and talking about us, because as a real estate agent or as a coffee shop owner, like, it's great and we have a lot of things to do with those businesses, but really, like, take people away and what's left? Right. What's left is debt and a bunch of space that no one belongs. I think music was the same way. Like, if we're not playing music that means something to us, but also trying to tell that story and let people attach to it, what's the point? Yeah. And I think that can go with any type of music. I think it go with any kind of business. Not that business shouldn't make money. You shouldn't be smart financially, right? Because that is a huge part. Businesses are there, to support us and to do those things, but it boils down to the people matter. Yeah. And that's, for me, it sounds like this soft kind of like, I don't know, fuzzy area, but that's how we operate, and that's how I've always tried to operate. Do we always get it right? No.
Yeah.
But we try to. And I think that's the important part.
You're right. It's so cool to have that. And when it boils down to just people and you know, other things in the businesses wouldn't be the same as what they are without the people. But so you're in Nashville, you're learning music business, you're learning about business a lot. When, I guess, do you have a love for coffee while you're there? And then, I mean, where does the coffee thing, because do you leave there, you graduate and think, I'm going to go home and then I'm going to travel and go to Colorado, go to the mountains? Like, what happens in that period?
So it's funny that this was back in, so I get to Nashville in 2001. This is when coffee was taking off.
Yeah.
And it looked like Starbucks, and it looked like Caribou in certain markets, and it looked like these big things, but it also looked like these little mom and pop places with, you know, dark colors and stages and open mic nights and, you know, poetry readings and all these things, right? And that was coffee for us in this country. And as a student looking to, so there's 4 different categories of music business that kind of, what are they called? Little legs you can take. So my direction was management.
Okay.
And so because of that, we were doing classes on things like, you know, record label management and artist management, all these things that are management, operational.
People management, yeah.
And so because of that, we obviously we spent a lot of time in these little venues trying to like work out deals for artists and do all these things. But what it boiled down to is I spent a lot of time there just doing studies and hanging out with friends. And we started every night meeting at one of those type of places. We finished every night meeting at one of those types of places. It became clear to me that's like, man, what would it be like to have a venue? A spot where we can promote the arts in all those forms. So it could be live theater sketch, it could be music, it could be poetry, it could be book readings, it could be film, who knows? But what would it look like to have a spot that was very well set up for those kind of live arts, but also had great coffee, maybe had some wine. And so I got hooked on this idea of venue, of space. And didn't really, I drank coffee sorta, you know, but it wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
But so I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to open this venue. I didn't know where. That didn't matter. It was just, I was going to do it.
But it was more about the venue rather than what was going to bring.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the transition, and I think this is the best part of my story, is it went from, if you're going to own something, you got to know something. And so of course I sort of knew I had been booking shows and doing things like that through high school. So I sort of understood throwing an event and the kind of work it took and creating the partnerships with vendors and sponsors. And I knew that. I knew a little bit about booking traveling shows for artists. I'd done that a little bit. I knew about playing because I'd done that too. So I had an idea of the art side. I wasn't super worried about that, but the coffee side I didn't know anything about. It just seemed, I was one of those guys that look at a coffee menu and think, that's a lot. How does these people remember all this stuff and know how to do it? And I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so by that point, I guess it was my end of my sophomore year, Belmont launched their entrepreneurship program. So it was a brand new school within the business school. And I was like, man, I front loaded all my music business courses. So I didn't have any music business specific courses left except for my capstone. Great. And so I had 2 years ahead of me, probably 2.5, even at full time. It's a huge program. And so I was like, well, I have just general electives. That's it. So I switched. So I went and talked to the dean of the entrepreneurship school, who ended up being, he's probably been the most impactful kind of business mentor I've ever had. And basically found out that if I were to switch, I could probably graduate with 2 summer courses within 4 years, total. So I'd be out in my normal 2 years left. And so I started realizing, man, this would be really helpful if I want to open this place. So I switched majors, jumped over to entrepreneurship, and started this process of unpacking what it means to be a business owner. And I was thankfully a part of a program that was geared toward the entrepreneur. So it wasn't a case study based program, which are very helpful. Yeah. But this one was geared to the entrepreneur. We spent semesters talking about what it means to own the company and the impact it is on you personally and how you define success and what you're going to do to exit and all these things that nobody wants to talk about in business because we want to talk about selling, which is an exit, but we want to talk about getting big and the margins and operating capital and all the fun stuff. And
getting bought out by a giant company and all the rest of it and retiring on the beach.
Yeah, but we don't want to talk about the impact on your family and the fact that you're going to miss every holiday for the next 10 years.
18-hour days.
You're going to be broke all the time and your friends are going to be sitting in $60,000 a year jobs out of college and weekends off, and you're not going to have any of that. We don't talk about that stuff. But luckily we got to. And part of that deal was you have to know your business because you're it. Mm-hmm. No one's going to like it as much as you, and you're it. You are the janitor, you're the CFO, you're the CEO, you're the head of marketing, you're the head of people. you better learn something about it.
Yeah.
And so he challenged me to learn about the coffee, because my answer was always, I'm going to hire the coffee management out.
Yeah.
I'll hire a manager. They'll do the coffee. We'll be fine. I'll do the art and the management of the place. They'll do the coffee.
Yeah.
Perfect. I don't have to worry about it. And he challenged me to learn that stuff. So I met with a couple of coffee shop owners I really respected in Nashville, who for some reason said yes to meeting with some, crazy Belmont
college
kid.
student.
That has this big idea to make this cool coffee company. And so I met with them. We started diving in. I started realizing this coffee was this iceberg that I had no idea about. And there was, I see it. Like what I'm seeing though is like this tip. It's the final step in this process that is so deep. And I started realizing as I was unpacking it that I was like, oh, that's cool. Let me learn more about that. And I realized as I was leaving Belmont, there's a lot that I loved about the coffee, and I was losing interest in, as coffee was changing culturally in our country, but especially where I was in Nashville. I was like, man, this could be awesome. Like, what does this look like if I learn more about coffee? I started losing interest in, like, I don't necessarily know if I would care about this, like, all of this arts. Now, arts need to be a part of it, but I don't think I want to be an art space that has a little bit of coffee. I think I want to be a coffee place that has a little bit of art.
Yeah.
And so that's how that transition started.
Yeah.
And I ended up diving into, met some now great friends in Portland when I was there, and did these coffee classes, and they like immersed me in this like culture of kind of what was this like new wave of coffee operations that was starting on the, in that part of town, of the country. And I just fell in love with what coffee was about. And I was learning about origin, about where it comes from and the people that are making it, and different machines, and how we can translate this, and this, stylistic, spectrum of what coffee can be in the cup. And I realized, so it felt like every month it was like changing what I was, trying to come up with. And so it was just a real evolution. And it was that change of, I took all that management stuff and I was doing it. I still love it, but the transition of trying to learn something new and be better, kind of changed my whole rotation, because I didn't know before. And once you learn it, it's like, man. And I can still remember, like, even when I was we had moved at that point. We moved to Montana. That's where we were going to launch it. I remember meeting with people that were going to be coffee managers and having these interviews that were way early. But I needed to meet people because I didn't know enough at that point still. And I'll never forget thinking back on the fact that we missed out on so many leases, for this space. And like, man, knowing what I know now, and to actually launch something where we could open the door to people, and what that would have looked like had we done it at that time with what we knew and in that place. I mean, what would have happened? I have no idea. It may not have been. We may have been out of business in 6 months for all I know. But it was all that knowledge and that seeking. I don't even know how we got to this point in this conversation, but that transition was a huge deal. And it really set the stage for, like learning what we can do to be better.
So you go through those, like, those first 2 years, you're learning all about business and music stuff. You do all your classes, and then you think entrepreneurship, why not? Let's try it. And you think, I can do this in 4 years. Let's get it done in the next 2 years. And you go on this huge journey of like falling deeply in love with coffee and what it becomes. And then everything that you've learned before, the art, the music, adds to that space.
Absolutely.
So when you graduate, you have you met Jenny at that point?
Yep. So we got married a year prior. So we got married right before my senior year. Yep. Met at Belmont.
So you meet there, and then you both, obviously she's like on board with the idea, and you move to Montana.
Yeah. So she, I would never put words in her mouth, but I think she drank coffee when it was there. And I think she was willing to sign up for this weird dream that I have. I'm kind of an all-in kind of guy. Which I think we can talk about later, but it lends itself really well, but also makes it really hard because I need to believe in something. And the longevity and the power of that, if it's a brand or if it's an idea or if it's an event, I want to see it make change. And if it doesn't, it's hard for me to really like give any kind of deal to it. So having my own thing, I was like, what can this be for people? What can this be for me? What can this be for us? And so she was willing to basically like say, I can do this and we can do this together. And she was a huge part of it. She didn't know the coffee, but she went to the classes with me, you know, like it was like, we're going to do this together. You have to know it. And, she hammered it down and did great and was a huge part of it. And so luckily she's from Steamboat, Colorado, and her parents had moved to Montana for a few other things. I had some Montana connections back when I used to travel with, a band and do help with some merch and just kind of general help. So I knew some Montana people too, and we just needed a spot, my junior year to write this business plan that I was trying to graduate with. And so we could kind of pick anywhere. It didn't have to be if we're going to spend the time, let's try to figure out where we would move if we could. And we fell in love with Bozeman. Her parents were living at that point. I'd moved from Steamboat to Missoula. And so there was a little bit of connection there, but we just kind of fell in love with this idea of being back at West and being in the valley and having the mountains and the outdoors there, but also having a town that felt a little urban, a little suburban.
So much more appealing than Edmond at that time.
At that point,
right? At that point it was.
And she had never been, she had been to Edmond, obviously, to visit.
But with her family there, and it was it made more sense
Oklahoma
to go
to her was off and I would say probably when we had the conversation of moving from Montana back to Oklahoma, it was still, that was a big thing for her. That was some sacrifice. She definitely had no plan ever to live in Oklahoma.
Right.
And I didn't have a plan to ever move back. So, I think it was fine. Yeah. But the willingness was definitely, she was a big part of the success of that.
Yeah.
But she was into it. And that was, yes, we picked up and her mom went and looked at a house for us. We rented it sight unseen.
Straight to Bozeman.
Straight there, and that was kind of how we've always done things. It's like there's an opportunity, let's go do it.
Let's go figure it out.
Let's figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we got our basic needs done. Everything's met. Let's go.
We can figure this out. Yeah, and I think that was the start. And I think that some of that saying yes bit. We had no idea what was going to happen. Yeah, but I figured, worst case, I can always flip burgers, right?
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing I struggle to tell people is like that sense of that sense of adventure, and that let's go do it. And you have really, as long as your basics are covered and you can make money, you can always get a job anywhere.
Right.
Just go and try it.
And
if it sucks, enough? You can always go home.
Yeah. And am I transparent and open enough to do something that seems not as legit as a college grad?
Right.
And at that point, obviously now the power of this undergrad certificate is not that big of a deal.
Right,
in fact, as I look at new jobs, there's $35,000 a year careers that they require an MBA. It's that's crazy. But that's where we are. Right. But at that point we weren't. Here I am from a private school in Nashville with a degree in entrepreneurship and a 85-page business plan and some publicity to go behind it. Yeah. And I'm walking in, so I had a little bit of confidence, I think, that I'd go anywhere. But I don't know. Luckily I found a job. It took me a while. Yeah. Jenny went right into real estate appraising with her family, and that was great. Yeah. I was lucky enough to not have any school debt, and so I didn't have to worry about this instant, hey, we want our money back. Right. So I found a job. It was not in anything I'd ever done before, but what it did, but what I always in the back of my mind, I was like, surely I can get hired at $12 an hour at McDonald's, because that's what they were paying. Yeah. I don't know why they're paying that much, because no one wants the job, I guess. But it was I can do that. And of course, as you go into the job, I was am I willing? And at that point, I think I believed I really was willing to do whatever it took to be in a place I wanted and to have the shot at creating this company that was only been on paper so far. Yeah. And those two things together, I was we can do this. Yeah. I wasn't scared of it. I wasn't scared of the work. I wasn't scared of any of that stuff. Yeah. Let's do it.
And that's the question that you've got to answer and ask yourself is, am I willing to flip burgers while my other college friends are going off and they're signing $60,000 jobs and they're working and they might be buying a BMW and leasing it or what, they're coming out of college, right? And they're living this lifestyle straight out of college. They don't have much debt maybe, and they look like they've made it, right? Yeah. They're 21, 25, 25, and you're actually, I'm going to go and I'm willing to flip burgers because I'm going to build my dream. Right. It's when you're that young, it's a really hard conversation to have with yourself, right? But if you're willing and you believe in it, and you can always get a job.
Yeah, and if you can understand that, as we were talking before this all started, if we can operate in the fact that we don't need a lot of that stuff. So what do I need? What I need is a dream to follow and some people to do it with. Yeah. And I need a place to live and I need to be able to eat.
Have some food,
but shelter. But those things don't need to be the center point. Those don't need to be the chase. Yeah. Those need to happen, but they don't have to be the chase. Right. And I think that was important. And if I could go back and do things again, I would do things differently to keep focused on that the dreams are important and that the freedom of all the other stuff is also important. And I believe in that fully now. Yeah. And we're paying for that still right now, honestly. And I think but what's shaping our conversations now is what are we chasing after? And what is it that we don't need? We don't need some of the stuff that we have. And I think that's the fun part of this and the remembrance. But I needed a dream to chase and we were all in.
So you have this 85-page business plan, and you think, right, let's do it. I mean, where do we get to, like, opening up the store, and when does it become, like, real?
Yeah, so
signing a lease and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
So for about 3 years in Montana, we were slogging through leases and opportunities, and I had this business plan. I had won Practice Entrepreneurship Award at Belmont for that plan, which is really cool. Me along with a couple other entrepreneurs. But I started this blog. My professor at Belmont had one called The Entrepreneurial Mind. I started one called A Thought Over Coffee, and really set out to be crazy transparent on the process of dreaming, planning, and opening.
Yeah.
At that point, we called it Cafe Evoke.
Why Cafe? What was the name? Where did the name come from?
So the funny thing was that for 2 years I was planning this company. The title of the business was blank, but we had this idea of evoke thought. What is evoke thought? Like what can this place be for people, and what does the space provide?
Yeah.
Well, it came down to I needed to defend this business plan and present it and talk about it, and I needed a name. So we just moved Evoke up to the top and called it Cafe Evoke, and that's kind of how we ran with it.
Sure.
But, so I had this blog, wrote really transparently, ended up getting, at that point there was 5 or 6 kind of small business blogs. Anita Campbell had one, and Dane Carlson had one, and several others that were pretty like popular within like INC and Entrepreneur Magazine and all these things. So I had one, and I started getting picked up by these other blogs because I was this kid in this blog space. I wrote very off the cuff, which is not normal for business. Probably I still write that way, and it's this really weird, unedited kind of like.
I write the way that I speak.
Yep,
is it the same way?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm terrible at grammatical
everyone
stuff.
Yells at me like, "Hey, you need to edit." It's like I know I need to edit, but I kind of don't want to.
But when you read it, you know that it's coming from me, and you know exactly how.
And it was real life. I would say this was pre-Twitter, and I would say I wrote short bursts but big updates.
Okay.
Almost in conversation like I would Twitter. So I was on that a lot.
Yeah.
So I got picked up. So U.S. News and World Report reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to like feature this thing." And I had just moved to Montana.
Yeah.
And this was December of 2012. And so I got in U.S. News and World Report. You know, like I was standing in the middle of, it was snowing in Bozeman. They had plowed the street, so it was a big berm in the middle of this 4-lane downtown Bozeman. Yeah. And here I am with my coffee cup standing right smack in the middle of the road. The cars are honking and the photographer's out there. But, you know, like they flew this dude in from New York City.
Yeah, you're not going to miss this shot.
To take these pictures, and he was leaving that night.
Yeah.
So he flew here just to take pictures of me. And he was like, "I want you to do this." I'm like, and I felt like, I'm not doing this. This is embarrassing. He's like,
these people
know
who
I am.
Yeah.
The pictures were super cool.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we had this like momentum of people knew us, and they were interacting with us, and watching this kid from Oklahoma that lived in Nashville that moved to Montana, like figure out what business is like. Yeah. And, you know, I was sharing all these hard conversations. I was sharing good conversations. I was crazy transparent with the frustrations and just how this was happening. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know anything. And nobody is that transparent in business. And I used to get emails all the time from people like talking about that. And we dipped into some social stuff and some environmental things. And we, you know, we were a little progressive for that time.
Sure.
And so that all happened. You know, we talked about these leases, and we had a lease signed. Yeah. Finally, we were actually in Portland at one of these coffee classes with some friends, and I remember getting FedEx overnight to the hotel and signing these leases and sending it back, and we were stoked. And ended up while we were there, we were hanging out with the head of Noah Simonelli and the head of all these big time things that we had gotten to meet because of this network of friends. And right there, I bought equipment and put deposits down, and got back to Montana just super high on the idea that like, man, this is going to come to life. What's it going to look like? Yeah. And then Starbucks comes through. And then Starbucks didn't exist in Montana yet in this market. And so what they do is they come through and they sign LOIs.
They literally
at
buy
any
everything.
spot that could work for them. Yeah. So they could have 6 LOIs in one community.
Yeah, people listening don't understand this. They literally ruin small businesses in the town and buy up every single potential space.
It was this weird thing that like they were allowing their work to create a coffee culture in America was allowing my dream to happen at the same time I was now fighting with them. Right. This is really strange kind of back and forth. Yeah. And I've always highly respected their ability to spread this like
what they've done is amazing.
Coffee and all this, but at the same time, like I wanted to open mine.
Of course. Yeah.
So I get a call so we had signed it, you know, we're talking this California company that had this strip center in Montana. And so we'd already been working with them for a month, and we finally signed it. I don't think they had returned it. And they called me and like, "Hey, Starbucks just called. they want the space 2 doors down from you on the corner with the drive-through.
Yeah.
They've offered, I don't know, $28 a foot for it.
Yeah. Double, triple, probably what you guys had it for.
At least, definitely, probably $10 to $15 more.
Yeah.
I'd already committed every penny I had to the rate that I had picked out.
Yeah.
And they gave me the option, come up to this, which is not up to where they were, but come up to this.
Come up to a number,
or we're going to let this go and sign with them.
Yeah.
And I, you know, because for some reason I find myself in a lot of fun circles with a lot of important people.
Yeah.
I knew some of the guys that ran construction management for the corporation that owned that segment. So for Starbucks. And he's like, dude, they're not going to go in that spot. Like, they're already looking at raw land. It's going to be out on this other part of town. And I was like, well, I mean, so even knowing that, I was like, here's what I'm willing to do. And they said, hey, we're going to hold out.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool. So contract's done. Well, the problem is I had that weekend before had already ultimately bought and agreed to buying probably $10,000 worth of coffee equipment
to go into that space.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So
and fitted for that space too, right?
Yep. I mean, luckily that was pretty, like, the stuff I had purchased was universal. It didn't matter, but we had purchased it. So, you know, agreed to, like, now we could cancel it.
Right.
But the deposits were deposits.
Gone. Yeah.
And they were deals that I wasn't going to get anytime else because I was sitting at a pub.
Yeah.
Having coffee and beer and wine and the works with the heads of all these companies, and they gave me the bro deal, which is great. Except bro deals, anytime you do bro deals, as an aside, you get a great deal, but there's also not as much leeway because they've already given you a deal.
Yes.
Right? So
handshakes, and you don't want to back out because you have your buddy come bridges and all the rest of it.
Have your buddy design your website. Like, you don't get to like force yourself to be the first. Yeah. You get to work into the schedule. Well, that's kind of the same thing with this equipment. The deals were incredible. I never was going to get those again. Yeah. They were, I mean, it was awesome.
So it was probably still a stretch for you at that point.
Well, luckily, we had already done our financial projections, so I had already kind of pulled aside enough money. So it didn't I had the cash to do that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have spent the cash if I didn't have a spot.
And it didn't have a really good deal.
Right. I mean, I didn't, I never would have spent the money.
Sense.
So here I am. Yeah. So that's gone. Well, we keep working. You know, we keep meeting with communities and spaces and trying to look outside the box of, like, buildings that maybe have been vacant. How can we figure this out? How do we create a community space, and how do we make it for the people, and how do we tell that story genuinely? And we just couldn't make it happen. I wrote our biggest one. I restarted this blog during COVID. Yeah. I thoughtovercoffee.com and wrote about one of these things with Northeast Neighborhood Association in Bozeman. And it was the hardest, I still remember it today. Yeah. When I had to meet with the neighborhood community, and they hated me, and they thought I was now of course everything I wanted to do exists there, and they all absolutely love it. But I was the first. Yeah. And Jenny and I were at this meeting and getting,
it's always the hardest being the first. Always the hardest.
Just getting manhandled by it. And people were saying such mean things about us and writing articles, opinion pieces in the paper. And I mean, it was terrible. But I learned a lot. Yeah. But that aside, here I am. I have $10,000-ish locked up with machine companies. What am I going to do with this? Yeah. And my parents had been hiring somebody in Oklahoma to do their events called Dirty Water Coffee Company. Tag ended up being a friend of mine afterward, the owner, but I didn't know. So I called him. I was like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I do catering. I can do 10 a week. And, you know, like, we set up espresso machines at how parties and do this thing. Well, I took that idea, and I was like, well, what if I made this where we were actually not setting up these little tiny, like, kiosks, but we made this look like full-on shop in events. Yeah. So these formal, like, nice big setups, you know, all those things. So I was like, well, so I called these companies. I was like, hey, I have a deposit. This deal fell through. Do you have anything that's 110 that's, like, more home style? I could do this catering thing. I don't know a lot about the catering deal, but I know it happens. Like, what do you have? And they said, well, yeah, we have these, this. I was like, all right, let's do that. So I find a cart company. We build this big cart. We buy a trailer, and we put it all on this trailer, and we go set up these parties. And we do, I mean, our setup is a 10 by 10, like, full on, you know, like, skirted kind of coffee shop. I mean,
the real deal.
It sort of looked like what you'd see if you went to, like, a food court in the mall and you had, like, something in the middle. Like, it was kind of this big formal thing. So we couldn't do the small little things. Like, house parties were really difficult at that point. But we could do museums and weddings and businesses and all these things, you know, with this big cart. We had a sink on it. We had all this stuff. Yeah. And we started doing that. And luckily we got to use our money. And that's kind of how we launched Cafe Vote Catering first. Okay. So it's to be a third kind of tier. We always had this idea of doing it. Yeah. but
as another string to income.
Yeah, it's like,
or
hey,
whatever.
we could have a trailer at the ski resort. We could have, it's like, but it wasn't ever fleshed out. But we knew at some point a mobile version could happen.
Yeah.
So that's what we started with. So we went from this cafe is about to open to, we're doing catering. Oh. And so we do Bozeman for 2 years, I guess, and it was okay. And then in 2017, in December, during campaign season, my extended family at that point was pretty involved in Oklahoma City politics, and we found out that they were having some fundraisers and birthdays, and I was like, well, let's bring all of our gear down for the month. So we pulled the trailer from Montana to here. Mm-hmm. We booked a few of these parties. We had some friends that own businesses let us come and do that. They paid basically enough to pay we didn't charge a bunch, but we just charged enough to like make the trip free.
Yeah.
Well, as we were at these events, people would hire us for they're like, we're having a party tomorrow night. Like, you're there. And it's like, man, we have nothing to do.
Why not?
Yeah, we'll come.
Yeah.
And it turned into, I think we booked enough to pay the trip. We booked like 5 events for that month, and we turned, I think, maybe close to 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And we're like, man, this could work here.
This actually works. Yeah.
I know there was a little bit of this weird fuzzy thing because my friend Tag, who I guess we had gotten the idea from him, we had taken it a whole different like ideology for it, but he was in this market and there was a little bit of like, it felt a little strange the first bit of time when we committed to coming.
Yeah.
But we built this thing where we were focused on 2 to 4 events a week that were big. And got some businesses and subscriptions, and at that point, Citizens Bank of Edmond was actually our first kind of like corporate client that we had on subscription basis, which was huge. And it's funny that they're still a big part of the success of this company even now. And so
obviously the city as well.
And it's funny because we weren't here. But it's funny to think of that. Yeah, different ownership group and management, but now, I mean, they've been a huge part of my business story in Oklahoma since the day before we got here, which is awesome. So anyway, we had found out how big it was. So while we were here, we ended up buying a house downtown and made the decision. And it was easy because we didn't have kids, and it wasn't that hard. It was hard to think about leaving Montana because we fell in love with,
of course,
up there. But
was Jenny coming kicking and screaming?
She honestly, I got to the point where we had to make a decision, and so I'm big on. Especially in business planning, I tend to have an office that's just covered in whiteboard. Yeah. And our condo in Nashville had mirrors all in the living, and I don't know if you've seen that, but all those mirrors in like small spaces. So I was covered. I'd write on everything. Yeah. And so I had this whiteboard in my office, and it was like, where would we want to live? Where do we think would be good? And so Denver was on there. Montana, Bozeman was there. Oklahoma City was there because we knew we had a great thing that was happening. An opportunity, because I knew a lot of people. Yeah. Those ended up being our 3, after we drilled everything down, our 3 spots. We looked at Bend and some other places. We knew nothing about that, and we didn't want to start over. We knew at that point we couldn't afford, we didn't have the pockets to start anew. Yeah. So we had to have a connection. So we had a little bit of connection in Colorado from her, and from my parents have been taking us to Crested Butte and living there for, off and on since I was born. Yeah. So we had those 3 spots. And honestly, like, we realized we'd given Bozeman the go. Yeah. So that was sort of like kind of out for the business. So we could shut it down and stay there. Right. And find other jobs and move on. Sure. Or we can try to go to Denver, Oklahoma City. Well, Denver had no coffee as far as seeing coffee at that point, which is crazy. Because now it's one of the biggest, fastest growing coffee communities in the country. Yeah. But they just didn't have any. I was like, man, can we tell people about this kind of coffee? Like, can we afford that as a catering company? It's different when you have a shop. Right. You can throw events and you can get people in the door, but I have to go to them. Yeah. There are no other services like ours at that point either. Now there's 2 or 3, and I did a development for a long time and did a company there, helped the company get started in Denver too. We started looking at both, and it's like, man, if we're going to do this catering thing and Evoke, it has to be Oklahoma City. It has to be. That makes the most financial sense. Gives us the best chance to win. And I was like, and then, so for like a week or 2, we just saw it on the board, all the pros, all the cons, a SWOT analysis of every group, all these things. And it's like, it was like, if this business is to happen, it needs to be Oklahoma City. Okay. Or it needs to not happen. Right. And I just kept looking at that. I was like, man, I don't want to leave Bozeman. I love this town. And we're finally like, we feel at home, and we feel settled. Like this is our first place. There's a couple, like, we got married a year before, but before we moved to Bozeman, but it felt like our place. Yeah. We didn't know anybody, so all of our friends were group friends, and except all the things. Yeah. And I was going back to those, what's it mean to me to do a business that affects my family? Sure. Well, honestly, I think it was Jenny that really said, if we're gonna give this a go and we've tried, let's give it a go. Yeah. We don't have kids, it's easy. And so and I may not remember this correctly, but it felt like, as I look back, that she was one of the reasons why this we actually made this happen here in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
I don't think she loved it when we got here necessarily. It was definitely an acquired taste. And I think we're still acquiring that to figure out what this means to us. But we had a chance. And so we moved here, we ended up having our first kid, and then second, then third. But we got here, we were crazy involved. We found ourselves at tables with all the top chefs in Oklahoma City and all these events, and we were busy, and we had our office in the plaza and with some great friends of ours. And these were just really fun. Like, they were working, but catering is a hard job, and there's lots of late nights and there's lots of weekends, and the holiday season, when we were doing, 2 caters a day for 45 straight days from Thanksgiving to the end of the year.
Jeez.
And so there's not a lot of time for anything.
No.
And so I got to the point where it's like, all right, cool. That part of our business was operating in the black. Of course, as business goes, like, you still carry like debt of 5 years of trying to make it happen, but we were operating in the black. To me, that was a success story. And it was like, I don't know that we can do catering like this long term. I think we're reaching, at one point we had 3 or 4 employees, like we had 2 vehicles and we had several different setups, and it was going great, but it's like, how far do we want to take this? So we started to talk about, let's get this cafe open finally. We worked at a few locations, kind of off and on, didn't really work. And then we said, hey, here are 5 locations that we think we would be successful. Let's do them. So we prioritized those, again, all over the board.
Whiteboard everywhere.
Prioritize those locations. Started whittling them down. Well, we got through number 4 and it fell through. And it takes me back to our conversation of driving from Oklahoma City to Edmond. That one fell through. I was frustrated. The only one left on our list was downtown Edmond. And to me,
which at that point wasn't much, right?
I mean,
there was a few things, but it's obviously not what it is today.
Vin Dolce was a wine bar. They had just opened. Maybe before us, but nightlife, trying to do something cool and different. Across the street, they had just opened that Italian gyms. The glass blowing.
Was this?
This was 2011. When we were headed there. So
it had something had potential about it.
Things were starting to, like the pot was on the boiler and the flame was on. I guess. And so we drove down. And to me, it already I know we had 5 buildings on the board, but really there was 4 buildings on the board. And this 5th one, I was just like, this is not Evoke. Like, we have this presence in downtown, and we're the plaza, and we're this urban kind of like company. We want the sidewalk space. We want all this stuff down here. But we went, and I remember the building was, my good friend owned it. He was like, we can make this whatever you want. And I was like, I know, but look at this building. He's like, this is just like, we'll just gut the whole thing and rebuild it. What do you want it to look like? And we told him, he's like, send me stuff. So we started sending him this stuff, and we were very involved in the architecture group designed it, but we were like, no, this is what it's going to look like. Trust me, this was 2011. I started this vision in 2002. I knew what I wanted it to look like. And so we gave them all the stuff, and they came up with this is what this building could look like, with this caveat of, we don't actually know what's underneath the ceiling, because this building is the oldest building in Oklahoma County. And we don't really know, but if everything is, this is what it could look like. And I was like, man, really? Like, this building? He's like, yeah, let's do it. Do you want to do it? Cool. And I said, well, let's talk about some pricing. And he told me, I was like, you're making it where if I say no, I'll regret every second of not making a good business decision. So we said yes. And of course, right after that, my buddy Keith Paul at Good Egg Dining called and had a building that I actually wanted. And said, hey, we can make this happen for you. And I was like, dude, 2 weeks earlier? Yeah, I would have said, sign me up. And I wanted to say yes so bad, but I couldn't, because we made this deal and it was a friend. And I had this strange belief, cockiness maybe, or I don't know, that we could help create and drive some change in a district that didn't have it yet. And I hate saying that, because I think the district was a lot for a lot of people. And I don't ever like to use this, like, we started this thing to make it new, and people that absolutely loved what it was before. And I think that it was perfect for that. But I don't know that it was sustainable with my generation. And we were the next generation. So
what was that building
that we were in?
No, so the one that Keith offered you. Who's there now?
Right now, I think Killer Coffee is using that one still. Right next to Cheevers. Okay. That's exactly right. So Market C was a concept they had at that point. Man, such a cool building. So, anyway, I'm stoked for my friends at Killer. Like, I'm glad they got it. I'm sure they're outgrown it now, and who knows, they're probably looking for crazy, huge, awesome spot for their roastery. But, and so that started our Edmond thing. It's like, all right, cool. We're in Edmond, and we always like to make this joke. We instantly up the population of rolled up jeans and tattoos and instantly, and bikes and scooters. And that was, remember when scooters were a thing in Oklahoma City? So we take this on, and we start tearing down the building, and we start going through this stuff, and we start realizing, like, man, 4 drop ceilings later, we have the original roof. The original wood ceiling is in this building still.
Yeah.
And I start to realize the stories in this building and the impact on what a coffee shop or a market or a deli or anything, but like, what around the corner has been for our community, for a lot of people. But what about like the deli or the diner? But what could we be for this community?
Yeah.
We're not trying to be anything we're not. We're not trying to create this like urban thing in Edmond. We're trying to create Edmond's thing.
Yeah.
But we want to be transparent, and we want to wear it on our sleeve.
You want to be the host of Edmond's thing.
So we're going to design it how we want.
Yeah.
And how we feel like the personality of Evoke is. And we hope people can embrace it and realize that it's like that we're here for them. Yeah. And so we build this thing out, and we're a bunch of kids, honestly. Like we had this, like we called like this, all these people that joined us on staff to help us launch this thing. And I mean, we signed our lease in 2011. We opened in May of 2012. And I mean, I think I had this thing, and people would always ask me like, "Oh, what's the future look like?" I'm like, "Dude, have you looked at the success rate of little coffee shops owned by, I don't know how old I was at that point, but younger than I am now. It's like, it's not very good. I'm shooting to try to make it to year 1 or 2 or maybe 3. Yeah. However, I'm visionary, and I can't stop thinking about what we could be. And I said, but give me 5 years, and I think this district rises up, and we're supported by a lot of things that have nothing to do with us. Yeah. Well, 5 years comes, and there's talk now. There's not action yet. And I'm like, well, at least people are talking about it. Yeah. Like as a viable option. Yeah. There's been some come and go, some companies and some changes, and there's some vacant space, and there's some retiring, and but people are talking about what Edmond could be. Right. And then within from year 5 to year 7, we start seeing actual money put down and some change really starting to happen. Yeah. Fast forward to 2019, when we have an offer, and we, put this ownership group together that we still are a part of in a small way. And they said, let's take this. And I'm like, awesome, let's do it. So I sell the company. Yeah. Majority of the operating part of it. And now we're seeing even more so this spring, even through COVID. And I was talking to a person on Facebook about this the other day. I've never felt downtown Edmond be more alive than it is right now, despite COVID. Yeah. And I think there is something about the idea that we can be a downtown Edmond for Edmond. We don't have, this isn't an apologetic, we don't have to enter with this apologies to the market. We can actually say, no, we're here because we believe in this district and we live here. And it's actually okay to say I live in Edmond and I participate in what Edmond's doing because it's for Edmond. Right. I know there's a lot of chatter about Auto Valley versus downtown Edmond and Paseo and Plaza and and maybe but I think finally people are realizing that we're genuine here. Yeah. This district could be great. We have, on an urban planning level, all the things that you need to be successful. We just didn't have a collaborative vision to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing this adoption of, let's take Rolling Deep, for instance. It just happened. Yeah. I'm super awesome. Stoked. And 5 years ago, and I catch myself saying this kind of stuff, and I always asterisk to myself too, is we want to do a lot of things and I couldn't do them. Yeah. And now there's people here that can, and I'm super excited, and also found myself a tad bummed because I tried to do those things back in 2012 and just no way I could make it happen. Yeah. And so now it's happening, and I'm trying to celebrate those and not get pissed, but that I didn't get to be a part of it. Right. But Rolling Deep, I remember talking to Dusty. Dusty did that piece for my kid in this room next to us, and Dylan Bradway did this piece on my wall over here, and Jason Pauly and Dylan did our big thing in our coffee truck, and Dylan did our first mural at Evoke, and Jason Pauly and Dylan did another one, and then Dusty and Tanner did our new one. We've always had this connection, and they're all Plaza people. Yeah, that's how we got to be friends, is back in our Plaza days, and to see the Grant Group and the Rail Yard get Dusty and all of his people together. Yeah. And honestly, the most exciting part is not that happened, because I just hope that they all got paid, but I assume they did. Artists can take paid jobs, and they should. Yes. But it's the adoption of the excitement from that crew. Yeah. Saying this is legit and this is real, and I want to put my heart on this building for everyone to see. That to me was the exciting part.
That's exciting.
Not even the event. The event was incredible, right. But the fact that these artists were willing to say, like, to be okay and to adopt the fact that this is incredible and this is a great place to be,
and then it's accepted by the city as well.
Oh, everything.
That's huge.
Yeah. So there's so many things that I took away from that had nothing to do with Rolling Deep, except to see them so excited about it. And it was a different direction, I'd had a lot of conversations about trying to get access to be able to paint. And it was like, oh, could I do that? But I need the businesses to each and one to sign off that they're okay with it. Or I don't know, we don't have an ordinance for this yet. And now that we're having it, there's this embrace that's happened with that space. And man, I couldn't be more excited for everyone that's working their tails. And I'm spending a lot of time working on this advocacy level, I guess, on my own in my own headspace, trying to figure out what we can do to make it even better. And there's people on the ground willing to put money up and willing to have a lot of meetings and a lot of time spent on things they're not going to see a bottom line return necessarily.
Right.
But man, to have the right people in town that have not only have the vision but have the money to help it's what we've missed. We've been missing that.
Yeah, I did a podcast recently, and it'll be out previous to this one, about like the interactive art that we have in Edmond at the moment. And just that kind of like the willingness to be involved in it from like you mentioned, like the business owners have to sign off on this, or they have even put up some money to have this here. And Edmond's known for having some great art around it outside its businesses and all the rest of it, and it's only increasing. And to see that rolling deep, it's like, that's sick.
It's huge. Huge. And it's funny, a great story about our kind of art council and all that is that one of the clerks is kind of in charge of that a little bit on like creating the money and all that. She's incredible. And she was in the shop having a coffee, and I made a comment about a totem pole to a friend that was working with me, and she overheard me. She's like, "You guys want a totem pole? We can try to make that happen." I was like, "Cool." Not like, and then it was gone. Yeah. Like we were just talking about this totem pole that could be out front. And that, like literally the next day, she comes in with this printed piece of paper of a totem pole. She goes, "Hey, I found this. We can make this happen. You guys sponsor half, and the city will sponsor half." And it can go right out here.
Where else does that happen?
And I literally looked at her and started laughing. I was like, there's a lot of this that I am crazy ecstatic about. I was not expecting you to come back the next day with this picture of a totem pole. But I think it's awesome that you're A, in tune to this as much, and B, that like this is a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, the city, this private public partnership collaboration
can actually happen.
Is literally what is driving this stuff. No one's compromising here.
Right.
We're collaborating. We're coming together, all different styles, all different backgrounds. People, I say this a lot, and this is aggressive. People did not they hated us when we first opened in downtown Edmond. I mean, we didn't have free tea refills. We didn't have sweet tea. We didn't have blended drinks. We didn't,
because you were different.
We were kids. We parked, they just didn't, there was this weird, we kind of made some ripples in town just by opening, and people didn't love it. And that's changed now, which is really nice. But I remember this, but we had the same goal. We just wanted a vibrant, healthy, important district to service Edmond. Mm-hmm. I didn't care what everyone was doing downtown. Was I jealous at times for like the accountability and the social connections that the Plaza had and that Paseo had, and this like kind of collaborative one mind
community?
I was jealous of that because we didn't have that in downtown Edmond. We had a lot of, felt like kind of, this is how we've always done it.
Right.
And we had this, but what if we didn't do it that way and we changed it?
Yeah.
And it was, how do we collaborate? I don't want, there's a lot of people that, we've always done the arts festival this way. I was like, well, what if we didn't anymore? What if we did it different?
Yeah.
Like, what if I didn't compromise by saying, block my front door, and I embraced it and said, hey, how do we collaborate and be a part of this?
How can I be involved?
And so we had to say this to ourselves too in the mirror. It's like, this is collaboration. We're not changing the world. Mm-hmm. We are not the driving force of change. However, can we come to the table with a different mindset and collaborate with that and start to interject some differences so that we can see a step 2 or a step 12 or whatever step. We didn't start downtown Edmond. We didn't grow it as a company. It wasn't Jenny and I. It wasn't me. It wasn't any singular person. It was a group of people that have believed in it.
Yeah.
But if that group doesn't change and grow and move, and then what happens? It stays the same.
Right.
And so you need that. And that's exactly what our hope was with Evoke, was that we could start that and get involved and participate and be a part of the conversation and be active with the city. And that's why I go to every city council meeting, every planning commission meeting. I sit on the Downtown Urban Development Board. I'm big on the bicycles, but you have to get involved to know what's happening. And I remember, a former mayor, we were in a meeting and the former mayor said, well, what are you here for? I'm like, just to be here. Because if I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And if I'm not here, I don't know.
Right.
And it sounds dumb and not many people want to, and they don't need to.
Yeah.
But just to know that the accessibility is there, that if you want something done and you believe in it, you can make change.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what when we opened Evoke, that's exactly what we believed. When we sold Evoke, that's exactly what we believed.
Yeah.
Our real estate team is office right across the street from Evoke. And that's the only place for us that made sense, was to be in downtown Edmond.
Yeah.
And honestly, as I'm looking for my next thing, that's exactly what I'm like. It's made it really difficult because I need to know that there's something to fight for.
Right.
And that's not necessarily just selling some random product or some random service.
Yeah.
And so even looking at jobs outside of downtown Edmond is hard, because I've spent the last, since 2011 trying to develop downtown Edmond. I don't have the money that the developers have to buy a bunch of raw land and get businesses to open, but I have a lot of vision. I can talk forever. Yeah. And I care about it enough that we want to see this change. I don't need to be the catalyst, but we can all advocate for what we want. Yeah. And everything that we want can happen simultaneously. We can get, parking taken care of. People don't have to worry about that. And we can get public art taken care of. So we don't have to worry about that. And we can get food and drink, and we can create a retail environment, and we can create streeteries, and we can create curb access, and we can create all these things if we do it together. Yeah. But as soon as we start feeling like we had to compromise our vision and our dream to make it happen, I feel like we lose a little bit.
Loses the character, loses its soul.
So how do we get together at the table? How do we create these win-wins? And this is in business, this is in city stuff, this is in general life. How do we get to the table and say, what do we want? Yeah. And what does this look like to take your vision for Edmond and my vision for Edmond and put it together and create this master plan, as the planners like to talk about? Yeah. How do we create that? How do we create a healthier environment for cars and for bicycles and alt transportation? How do we create that? Why is it that we do some bike work and then we get all these people really mad and want to change that because we're allowing people to ride and walk? Yeah. And why is it vice versa? We get this stuff and then all the people that ride and walk want to get mad. So we're all here. Yeah. This is our town. Let's create something.
Sit around a table and talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's get the people involved. Why do we have 7 conversations happening in 7 different locations with 7 different people? Yeah. Why don't we come together and sit at one table and actually work together for this same thread? Yeah. And a great example is crosswalks and, pedestrian movement. We're having meetings. I remember sitting at a table with city managers and engineers and city planners and downtown urban board, and then me, some crazy kid that has a big beard and drinks coffee all day long. Yeah. And we're talking about pedestrian movement and, safety and where crosswalks should be. And I left that hour-long meeting excited because there was a lot of, city managers were there. Everybody was there. Yeah. And then just this lowly coffee guy. But I left
with
there
a valued opinion, though.
Yeah,
and they value that too.
Sure. And I'm willing to say stupid things and ask stupid questions and, and be repetitive. And I think that's a whole different thing probably, but then I have this conversation later with somebody else, like, oh yeah, we're doing these crosswalks over here. We've had meetings about it. I was like, well, who are you meeting with? Because I just met with all the head of cities departments, and that's not where we were talking about those places. And if you're having those meetings, why are we not meeting together? Yeah. You've been saying you've been waiting for years about that, but that's not what I took away from the meeting I was in. And I thought every stakeholder was in this meeting. Yeah. Which is great. And I'm sure and there's been a lot of people doing a lot of work over the years, but what if we collectively did that together? What if collectively as business owners, we came together and did the best thing for our staff and for our guests? And what if collectively, we as a team, in our cafe said, hey, what's the most important? If it's people, how are we going to take care of them the most? Right. And if it's community, how are we going to get involved? But really coming back to, if it's not about the people, then who's it for? Yeah. And the people of downtown Edmond, it's for the people of Edmond. And we love visitors. This is not that we don't want, we're trying to create this
welcome,
Edmond
come
thing.
On down. Yeah.
But why do we have to be scared to say that we're creating Edmond for us? Yeah. And we want you to come see it, because right now we know you'll drive to Okarche. We know you'll drive to Pops. Yeah. We know we'll all drive downtown, Oklahoma City. But what if we created something that we were proud of here? And what does that look like? And who's willing to put their neck out to make it happen? Yeah. And I said it in a public meeting, and I'll say it again. At some point, the city has to say we're willing. Mm-hmm. Somebody like Sunnyside Diner has to say, I'll take that building And I was terrified for them. Yeah. Because, I mean, honestly, like traffic flow, all the things that you look at in business was really hard right there.
Right. Yeah.
And I stood up and said, hey, here's the deal. This is not pro or con the actual company that's going to hang a sign there.
Right.
This is pro somebody willing
being successful
to do
in
it.
that spot. Yeah.
So they're willing. The city, you have to be willing also.
Yeah.
And if you're not, we're never going to go anywhere. We're just going to be basically a location for downtown Edmond will become Citizens Bank of Edmond's office and the city's offices, and that's all we'll be. And if that's what it needs to be, fine.
Yeah.
But I think the highest and best use is not that. I think those two tenants are a part of it. But how do we do something more? You know, and now we're seeing it with the rail yard and with the rail spur district and with, I mean, the amount of stuff that Citizens has done with Herd on Herd and other things, and this new Littler corridor that the city of Edmond is getting super creative to develop, and you know, all the stuff down on the north end of town now. And I don't think there's a more exciting place to be right now.
It's really exciting.
I don't know how I got from, you know, this kid
that was
pumped
about it though. You're excited.
Bands, like playing bands in Nashville to what I'm doing now, or what I am doing now. I mean, I help my wife run our real estate team. Yeah, you know, but I think there's more, and I think it's trying to figure out what that is and how we, you know, make great place.
Yeah, 100%.
So
I honestly we need to do a part 2. Because I wish I didn't have to go and work this afternoon and we could sit here for hours. But I really want to dive in another podcast, and if possible, we'll get Jenny in and talk about the real estate stuff, because I'd love to hear her story and talk about what you guys do with the real estate and how you have the impact and you do. But I mean, for now, I mean, thank you so much for coming on.
And thanks for having me. It's always great talking.
Yeah, and like I said, we share the same. I love to talk, you know, and you love to talk, and it's great to see your passion and everything you have for this city and the company, and just, you know, back to collaborating, community, being involved, you know, back to the band stuff, you know, the music stuff, to where you are now. Like, it all follows the same theme.
Absolutely.
So appreciate you coming on, and for everyone listening, I'll post all the links down below to everything Jason just mentioned. But thanks for listening. We'll catch you next episode.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
This podcast was presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who've been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.